Dan Schlossberg, welcome to the Baseball Bookshelf Conversation.
Thanks very much, Ron.
Well, you've got a very busy fellow. You've got a bunch of books that you've already got in your oeuvre, but you have re-released, or I don't know if that's a proper word, because these are updated editions of the Designated Hebrew, the Ron Bloomberg story, and the new Baseball Bible. So let's talk a little about that today. Uh, the Baseball Bible, let's start with that. Things are always changing in the game, so it's easy to get new material that and even get new old material that has previously been overlooked that you can slip in. And this is, and I mean this with all the respect in the world, this is great bathroom reading because it you
Yes,
can
it is.
you can do it a little bit at a time, you can do it a chapter at a time. There's small nuggets as well as longer essays, but it's a good thing to just pick up when you got a few minutes. Uh, the
Well,
Designated
the way I
Hebrew,
look at it,
however,
Ron,
sorry?
I'm sorry, the way I look at it, it's not only a bathroom book, but a coffee table book. The only baseball book out there that's both. You can put it on your coffee table and enjoy it because of the artwork, but because of all the little nuggets, as you mentioned, it's a great bathroom book that you can backwards.
Now, you have previously published books called the Baseball Catalog and the Baseball Almanac. What is the difference between those and the Bible?
This is a progression. It began as the baseball catalog, which was a book of the month club alternate way back in 1880. There have been about a dozen updates since. This one is the most thorough update, totally done. It came out on March 17th, so it's got to be a lucky book, March 17th of this year. And it's the new baseball Bible because the sporting news was called the Bible of Baseball. And it's actually designed to look like the old sporting news.
When you do a book like this, when was the previous edition? When did that come out?
The last edition of this came out in, well, there was one in 2002, there was one in 2017, but this one is a total remake. It's expanded. It's the biggest book of its kind, 480 pages. The last edition was barely over 400 pages. So I've added a lot, including 10 articles for Forbes.com.
How do you come about with the, I mean, this seems like a lot of time-consuming effort to come up with the new material. Do you replace anything or you just add to it?
I've had to replace a lot because otherwise there wouldn't be space. It would be 1,000-page book. There are just so many things that happen every single day in baseball. As you know, something new and interesting happens every day in every game. You could pull nuggets from everywhere, as I tried to do. And even the season trades, the signings this year alone, which this will be for the next edition, just all the manipulations between the owners and the players when they were trying to decide compensation. And I hope it doesn't happen again. It might if the pandemic lingers and the ballparks are still empty.
It seems like next year another version of this book would be helpful for all the weird things that have gone on this year. Oh, talk about the economics of
Yeah.
something like this, though. How do you find a publisher who's willing to do something that has been done fairly recently?
Well, sports publishing does a lot of baseball books, and they've worked on several different titles, including the original edition of the New Baseball Bible back in 2017. And it was their idea. They said it's time for an update. So much has happened. So it really includes everything from 2017, 18, and 19 going into the 2020 campaign. So the book was completely up to date on March 17th when it came out. And that was just a couple of days after spring training shut down.
So you must have been doing this. Do you do this all along, figuring at some point you're going to be coming out with a new edition? So you're keeping notes on these little, uh, yeah.
I do, but also because it's very useful in my writing. I write for Forbes, I write for Latino Sports, I write for a number of other people too. And I love little Jason Stark is one of my favorite writers because of his odd offbeat stuff that he always runs. I like stuff too, and I collect it. I save it. I read a lot, and I save everything I can find. I also listen to a lot of baseball. And one advantage I have, Ron, over other baseball writers and baseball authors, I don't follow any other sport. I'm all baseball all year. I've never even seen a Super Bowl, so I'm totally baseball. So while people are watching the Super Bowl, I'm doing baseball history.
I may be misremembering, but going back a few decades, didn't you publish a baseball magazine?
I didn't publish it, but I wrote for it. That was Rick Cerrone's baseball magazine. He was the editor, and it was called Baseball
Right.
Magazine.
We don't see
I
too
did a
many
lot
of
of
those
writing for.
anymore. We don't see too many of those anymore. Now, basically, uh, there are like three. There used to be a Sport magazine, Sport, uh, a bunch of others that I still have in my attic. I can't remember their names. They would come out like several times a year. Uh, but you don't see anything like that anymore for a long time. So I guess it's the nature of the industry and the fact that people aren't reading that kind of stuff anymore, especially with what's available on the internet. Let's turn to the designated Hebrew now. So whereas the baseball Bible, there's always material, new material coming out. I can't imagine there's too much in Ron Bloomberg's life that has changed since his playing days that are covered in the book. So was the decision made to come out with the new edition of this one?
Again, that was a decision made by Sports Publishing. Skyhorse Publishing is the parent company. They wanted to come out with their, Bloomberg does Yankee books sell, and obviously it's a Yankee book. He was a really billed as the Jewish Mantle. You might remember that. And then he was platooned so much against left-handed pitchers that he never really got the chance. Plus, he had a whole lot of injuries. But they wanted to update the book and talk to Bloomberg about the changes in baseball today since that book came out. There been a lot of changes. The designated hitter and the election of two H's Hall of Fame at once for the first time when Martinez and Baines got in. So much has changed in baseball, and they wanted Bloomberg's update because he was the first DH.
Bloomberg is a fascinating storyteller. I've met him on a number of occasions. And when he and Art Shamsky are together talking about Jewish baseball, it's like an Abbott Costello routine between the two of them. Uh,
Oh, I know.
when you worked on the book with him, what was the process? Did you visit him at his home? Did you talk on the phone? Did you exchange emails? How did that work?
All of the above. I did visit him in Atlanta a couple of times, spent a lot of time with him there with a tape recorder, went out to dinner with him, and had trouble eating my dinner because Ron was trying to eat everything on the table. But that's how he is. Bloomberg is great. We went out to dinner up here in New Jersey, and they served family style, which means they brought out the salad in a great big bowl. Bloomberg ate 4 complete salad bowls. I mean, that's how the guy is. So, but
He's
it
like
was
a
great.
little.
It was fun working with him. It was a lot of laughs. A lot of laughs. And by the way, I've been on 2 or 3 baseball cruises that I organized with Ron and Shamsky. So that was a lot of fun. And the two of them were managers in the ill-fated Israel Baseball League. Bloomberg's team won the pennant, and he and Shamsky tease each other unmercifully about that because obviously Ron represents the Yankees, Shamsky represents the Mets, and there's a rivalry there too. They're great friends, but great rivals.
Was Shamsky the manager of the losing team for the title?
Yes, yes.
That worked out well. Uh, so in the new book, just to touch on a couple of things, is his book. Of course, he was the first designated hitter. What are his feelings about the designated hitter?
He loves it, but when it first started, he had no idea about it. He thought he was going to be playing first base opening day for the Yankees in 1973. But then he kind of tweaked his hamstring, and it was a cold day at Fenway Park, April 6th, opening day, cold, foggy. And Ralph Houk said to him, you're gonna play, you're gonna start, but you're not playing first base. So Ron went to Ellie Howard, who was a coach, and said, what does this mean? What do I have to do? And Howard said, you just bat and you come back to the dugout and you sit with me. So that's basically what happened. And Ron walked in the first inning of that game because he was batting sixth in the lineup and the Yankees loaded the bases. He walked with the bases loaded against Louis Tiant. Orlando Cepeda, who was batting third for the Red Sox, thought he was going to be the first DH. But because the Yankees had that little rally in the first inning, Bloomberg got the chance. And his bat is the only one in the Hall of Fame because of a walk.
What does he think about this year being the special case, the designated hitter in the National League?
Well, he likes it. He likes the proliferation of the DH because it keeps his name alive. And he's got another book coming out pretty soon. I think it's called The Captain and Me. I think that's the title. He's writing it with Dan Epstein. He likes to write with guys named Dan. And it's about his life with Thurman Munson, which should be very interesting.
There was a section in the book here where he talks about some of his teammates and he talks about his relationship with Thurman Munson. Would you care to talk about that a little bit?
Well, Thurman Munson had a bad reputation with the media. He was a surly guy. He was the Yankees captain, but with the media, he wasn't exactly Mr. Friendly. And of course, he and Reggie Jackson had their moments, their disagreements, let's say. But Bloomberg gets along with everybody. I mean, he was just great, and he's still to this day like that. Signs autographs. He's very friendly. In fact, after every game during his career, the writers would all circle around his locker because they knew they can get some great quotes from him when they weren't sure what other Yankees might produce, especially guys like Thurman Munson and later Reggie Jackson. So Bloomberg was a very popular guy, and to this day, he says, "I like to get along with everybody. It's the only way to be."
It's a good attitude. He is a breath of fresh air in an otherwise tense universe. Are you involved with the Pandemic Baseball Book Club?
Very much so. Yes, I'm a member.
Okay, how did that come about for you? First,
I
first,
found out about it.
first explain what the Pandemic Baseball Book Club is.
Okay, I've written a couple of articles about it, one for Forbes. The Pandemic Baseball Book Club is a confederation of about 20, maybe by now it's probably about 25 baseball authors of 2020 baseball books who are unable to do in-person book tours or library presentations or speaking to Kiwanis or Lions clubs. So since we're barred from that and we have to promote our books, otherwise they'll die on the shelves, we all got together and formed this book club where we promote each other's work by doing things like this, a Zoom meeting, a podcast, a lot of electronic things, promoting each other's books, interviewing each other. I interviewed a fellow author named Danny Gallagher, who was an Expos beat writer who wrote a book about the Expos. And I did a podcast with him. Mike Healy, who wrote a Mets book, interviewed me about my book, The New Baseball Bible. So we're helping each other out. And it's really a great idea. It's really working well. And there's a newsletter, there's a page, a website. So the Pandemic Baseball Book Club is really helping all these authors who otherwise would be rivals and who would be stranded with books on the shelf and nowhere to sell them.
Well, I think it's a fantastic idea. They say necessity is the mother of invention. So it's something good that came out of this. And it is nice to hear the different authors together talking about the process. You might be writing a book about Ron Bloomberg. Uh, Someone might be writing a book about pitching in the 1800s, but excuse me, there's still common ground. There's still common ground in the business aspects. I mean, you're a veteran writer. You've had relatively a little trouble finding publishers and agents and whatnot, as opposed to someone who's just starting out who might be having that trouble. So it's like a mentorship as well. And I just think it's a fantastic thing. I have my Pandemic Baseball mug right here. I proudly, there you go. I have a Pandemic Baseball bookshelf T-shirt I wear, and people ask me, "What is the Pandemic Baseball bookshelf?" And I'm only too happy to spread the word about it. Uh, since these are two books that you have done before, is that easier? Is it harder? I mean, what? And you mentioned that in the Bible you've gone back and taken things out. What about the designated Hebrew? Is everything still in there plus some new things, or was some stuff taken out of that too?
Everything is in there plus new things. It was a lot easier to work with that book than it was with the New Baseball Bible, only because the New Baseball Bible covers the entire history of baseball, whereas the Bloomberg book is all about Bloomberg, which really began in 1967 when the Yankees made him the first draft choice, first amateur draft choice, and then onward. But the New Baseball Bible is about the entire history of baseball dating back to the 19th century.
Was there sports publisher? Did they publish the previous version?
Sports Publishing did publish the 2017 version, but before that it was Triumph Books, and before that it was Jonathan David Publishers. So like a good free agent, I moved for the best offer.
How does that work when a book is published by one publisher at first and then it moves to another one? How does that work as far as, do you need to get permission? Do you need to get the rights? How does that work?
It's a very good question. I've never been asked that before, but I'm very happy to answer it. I felt like it was your early days of free agency before, actually before Marvin Miller, and Jonathan David Publishers wanted to exercise intellectual property, saying the book was theirs, and I could not publish it anywhere else, even if they were not going to publish an updated edition. So I finally hired an attorney, an intellectual property attorney, to secure the rights to the book, which I did. And then later on, once I brought it to Triumph Books, I made sure I put a clause into my contract that said if they were not going to publish an update in X number of years, the book rights reverted to me and I could shop it elsewhere, which is also what I did.
Very cool. Very cool. It's good. Good to know for all the authors out there who've published something and want to move it along somewhere else. I mean, there are books like, of course, the one-shot deal, or if you will, a two-shot deal with a revised edition like Designated Hebrew. But one of the big bugaboos I've always had about book titles is with the use of words complete, because it's never
Yeah,
complete. I mean, as long as it's baseball, there's going to be new things to put in. And I think that's one of the problems that books like Total Baseball had. Total Baseball, for those who don't know, was a tremendous thick book of statistics like the Baseball Register, like you might find on baseballreference.com. But there were also features, articles that were, the book was updated frequently, at least every other year, I'm going to think, for a number of years. But the cost, I guess, deterred people from buying it just for the articles, because they certainly could get the statistics elsewhere. But your coffee table slash bathroom book is the kind of thing that is always entertaining. You always pick up. It's divided into chapters by general topic, so you can jump to expansion area. You can jump to owners. You can jump to umpires, and just pick and choose what you want to read. Which I think, if you're in the mood for an everything bagel, you get that. If you want poppy seed, you get that. So I'm sorry, I'm still operating in Yom Kippur mode here. So still thinking about food.
well, the interesting thing, Ron, is at the beginning, when I first did this book, I wasn't sure whether to do it chronologically or by topic. That was a very major decision. And I decided by topic because how could you do something like this chronologically? It just doesn't work.
There have been books that there are baseball chronologies that do go year by year and say what's going on, but I don't think that would have the same entertainment value. It's good for research and reference, but as far as entertainment value, I think what you've done is the better way to go.
Well, I agree. And my book has a tremendous index, a very long index, for which I paid handsomely to have that done. And it's great for the researcher just to go into that index and find what he wants to find.
Both books serve a great purpose for the individual readership. I mean, people who want to be entertained, who want a general knowledge of baseball, will go to the Baseball Bible. But I imagine, you know, using the example of my book on Hank Greenberg, that your book on the Ron Bloomberg story is a popular book among a certain segment of readers. Makes a good present for Hanukkah and bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs as well. Uh, but I'm sure a fair amount of when Ron was able to. Has Ron been involved in any of these Zoom meetings as well?
Yes, we did one together for the Baseball Hall of Fame author series.
Hmm.
It went very well. It was a lot of fun. We did that was fairly recently, within the
Do
last
you
couple of weeks.
do you find that working with Ron, you have to rein him in a bit? Does he have a tendency to tell the same stories over and over again?
Yes, the best way to put it, I love Ron, but he's kind of like the real life little Abner,
Hmm.
if that explains anything. I mean, he's an overgrown kid in many ways. He's a great guy to be with, has a great sense of humor, really super nice guy. But I'll tell you a great story that illustrates the Bloomberg psyche. I interviewed Sheldon Stone, Bloomberg's agent for the book as well. Sheldon told me that one Thanksgiving he was invited to the Bloombergs in Atlanta for for the holiday. He went down, they had a big Thanksgiving dinner, and he went up to bed. Around 11 o'clock, he hears wild cheering coming from the living room. So he tiptoes to the top of the steps and looks down and sees Ron's parents watching a taped game where they knew he was going to hit 2 home runs, but they acted like it just happened each time.
He's a fun guy. There's like and a very generous guy. He's very generous with his time. He works with kids a lot. He's was involved in sport camps when we were able to have such things.
Yeah.
So, what are you working on now? Working on anything new now?
Well, there's something called the Internet Baseball Writers Association of America, which has more than 600 members. Are you in that too?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. I am one of 3 editors of their brand new newsletter, which is starting to print October 1st. So I'm looking forward to that. So that's my major current project, in addition to my ongoing work with Forbes.com. I'm a national baseball writer for Forbes.
What has that been like this season? Too. I mean, I'm guessing you have not attended any games in person.
Spring training only.
Uh, so I mean, I know watching the games, the vibe is certainly different among the. I follow the Mets, so the vibe between the announcers is certainly different. And I wonder if that's because of the lack of people in the stands, or it's almost like a resigned attitude. This is what we have to deal with. And they make it as entertaining as they can. But as someone who's been listening to these guys for a long time, I can tell there is a difference.
Well, for road games, certainly, because they're not there. They're depending on a video feed. So it's kind of like a recreated game in the 21st century. So they're not there. They can't see everything going on. They can't see who's in the bullpen. They can't see anything really, except what the visiting team feeds them. So there, it certainly makes a difference. I thought Gary Cohn has done a remarkable job. He's one of my favorite announcers. He's really good. Howie Rose is outstanding, probably the best radio announcer. And these guys are doing the best they can with what they've got. As for your use of the word resigned, if you're watching a lot of Mets games, it's understandable.
That's true. Uh, for
Even
for
Jacob
those
DeGrom.
for those who
Even
aren't familiar, tell us what recreated game is.
recreated game in the old days was when Ronald Reagan, who was one of the broadcasters at the time, had a teletype and he had sound effects. And he would sit there and it would say B1, S1, ball one, strike one. Then it would say double to left. And he would have to do all the sound effects with like a pencil hitting on a wooden block for the sound of the bat hitting the ball, canned crowd noise, which he could raise or lower the volume. The best I ever heard at doing that, and you might remember this guy too, Les Kiter with WINS. He did the Giants games after the New York Giants moved to San Francisco. For a couple of years, Les Kiter recreated Giants games. He was fantastic. He was the only announcer I've ever heard, recreated or otherwise. You would have to sit and listen to the radio and not do anything else. He was that good.
Wow. I mean, I remember an episode of MASH. MASH had a writer on the show named Ken Levine, who was a baseball writer for a time, and I always get a little kick when they toss in a baseball reference. And in one episode, Armed Forces Radio would broadcast the game a few times. And a long story short, they did their own recreated game within within the show. So that was kind of cool. Well,
Yeah, they had
Dan
a whole
Schlossberg,
episode, they
it's
had a
been
whole episode about the 1951 Bobby Thompson home run,
mhm,
about the Pendleton home run. That was great. I really enjoyed that. And they tricked Frank Burns.
right, right, which is always a good thing. Uh, well, Dan Schlossberg, it's been a pleasure talking to you, catching up with you, finding out what's going on. Both books are highly recommended: Designated Hebrew, the Ron Bloomberg story, and the new Baseball Bible. Continued good luck, and hopefully we'll get to a game next year.
Thank you, Ron. I love your hats, by the way. Beautifully organized.
Thank you very much.